how have you felt in the moments when you've heard from a student who's graduated?
Like I made a difference. We better get the quotes right. We better spell people's names right. The designs better lead to better readability and enjoyment and engagement with the audience. Yeah, you can tell, and you know this already. I mean, I love it, and I could tell you all the ways and all the reasons why. But I think it's about that storytelling more than anything, and it's about that personal growth that students that go through our program experience as well. We start with freshmen tomorrow. So that's a thing. And I'm looking forward, honestly, to getting back to it. I'm going to find my earbuds. We've got, a lot of possibilities with 5 days a week and getting back to some normalcy, which would be awfully nice.
Then I'm also working on this video project where I am talking to different people about just their stories in general, but also about what their passions are, whether that be like a job or an activity or a project, and how that passion, like what about that passion specifically draws them to it and makes them keep going even through like challenges, and what they've learned from that passion and how it has sort of like shaped who they are and what their life has been and what their story is. So could you start by just explaining who you are and what you do and how you started doing that?
All right. So my name is Mike Simmons. I'm a yearbook and technology teacher and advisor at Corning Painted Post High School in upstate New York. I'm entering my 21st year in the Corning Painted Post School District. I live here with my wife, who's also a teacher, French and Spanish, and our 4 kids, our oldest of whom is on the yearbook staff, will be a sophomore this year. Like I said, we're in upstate New York. We've got chickens in the backyard and a big old garden and a berry patch that I'm getting a lot of joy out of right now. And we're on the eve of a new school year, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to it and having kids back in the classroom full time.
Could you talk about how you first got involved with the yearbook?
My yearbook journey started in 2001. My wife and I moved to town. We moved to Corning intentionally. We didn't want to be near our parents as newlyweds. We love them very, very much. And they're incredible people, but we wanted to make our own way and be in a place where we were starting a new life together. I became fast friends with an English teacher at West High, where my wife and I started, a guy by the name of Mike Corning, who had gone to West and had been there a few years as an English teacher. He happened to be the yearbook advisor. And we just struck up a fast friendship early through a shared love of photography. And Mike taught me how to use the darkroom and shoot film. I shot film previously, but how to develop film in those early days. This would have been in the fall of 2001. I never did yearbook when I was a student. I always told my staff I was much cooler than them. I was the drum major and I was the tech and theater guy. And total nerd all the way through. And Mike did yearbook. And at that time, they had a photo advisor, Michelle Caulfield, who was pregnant and due in January of what would have been 2002. And Michelle, in December, slipped and fell on some ice as she was out and about in town, and that induced labor, and she had her baby early. That baby was Kylie Caulfield, who I'm sure through school. At any rate, she had to go out on maternity leave, and the principal said, "Hey, new guy," pointing at me, "you're always hanging out with Mike Corning. You love photography. So why don't you go be the yearbook photography advisor? And I didn't even know how to spell yearbook back then. I had no idea. Maybe just I had hung out, to my recollection, I had hung out in the lab, with Mike and his staff. But it was brand new to me. And so I started December 2001, and it has absolutely transformed my life, my path, my interests and passions. I didn't know back then that Comic Sans was a bad choice, and I didn't understand about design, and I didn't really care about journalism, and I didn't really know how to teach photography, let alone be plugged into a nationwide network of journalism advisors and other programs, and people who are this day some of my very best friends in the world. So I like to say it all happened because of Kylie Caulfield being born, which is functionally true, if it maybe just makes for a good story. But yeah, that was 20 and a half years ago. It's incredible. And I'm getting into it. Here we transitioned the program in September of 2014 with East and West closing into Tesserae. And we're about to start the 8th edition of Tess at the new school. And I'm super excited to get back after it with my kids.
What kind of teacher were you before you were the yearbook advisor?
That's a great question. Yeah. So my undergrad, so my mom was a teacher as I was growing up. And some of the earliest memories that I have are of me hanging out in my mom's classroom on the weekends. She worked with people with special needs. She had worked at, like, back in the 80s, and you see it, I was going to say less these days, but differently these days. But there would be homes, like group homes for people with significant and severe disabilities where their families couldn't care for them. And they would put everybody, there were definitely like negatives to this, but they would put everybody just kind of like all in the house. And then they'd have a staff and nurses and teachers and things. And my mom started in those and then moved into public education, working in special education. And so very early, her teaching influenced my own, or informed my own path. And I knew when I was going to college that I wanted to be an educator. And in the mid 90s, when I was looking for schools, and I was also a marching band guy, as I shared previously, the movie Mr. Holland's Opus came out with Richard Dreyfuss, and it's about a music teacher that transforms his students' lives. And I saw that movie, and I said, "That's it. I'm going to be a music teacher." And so we looked for colleges. I wanted to be part of a big marching band. I found Indiana University. I made it through, and I chose to go there. I made it through one semester of music education classes and knew that it absolutely was not for me. For music ed majors, they were practicing like 6 and 7 hours a day, and music was a love, but I didn't want to make it my life. And one of the reasons that I picked Indiana was because it has an outstanding school of education aside from just the music ed program. And so I transitioned there to a special education track, working or setting me on a path to work with people with disabilities like my mom, K-12 special ed. And I got hired at West High in Corning as a special education teacher, working with students with emotional behavior problems, a lot of anger management issues and things like that. And so I was able to do that for four or five periods a day. And then I had one period of yearbook right off the bat, December of my first year there at West. And so for 12 years, I did special ed and yearbook. And then when we knew that the school was merging, Mrs. Sheehan said, I want you to go over to East and get them stabilized, because they had a much different yearbook program than we did at West. So we took 2 years to set the stage with me doing all yearbook and technology classes. And then we merged in September of 2014. And it's all been tech and communications, photojournalism, and yearbook since then. I'm still very fond of and very, very conscious of my training in special education, because I think a lot of good special education, I think a lot of the tools that special education teachers use are just good teaching. The idea of differentiating instruction, or not just explaining it one way, but being able to explain it 4 different ways, because that's going to make sense to those kids over there. And that's going to be what makes sense to this kid right here. And those other 2 ways are going to maybe crack, those 2 kids over there and bring them to understanding. So I'm really glad that I have that in my background, because on the yearbook staff, I've had kids with significant learning disabilities side by side with the valedictorian in the class, and we've made it work for everybody. What's fair work in yearbook is not always equal work. And the yearbook certainly does not need every kid that's ever come through my door, but there are some kids that have come through my door that have absolutely needed yearbook. And to see it work in people's lives and impact them has brought me a lot of joy. And sometimes that's with kind of a special education flavor underneath it all, if that makes sense.
How, or do you bring that idea of saying one thing in different ways, or teaching one thing in different ways to appeal to different students, to the actual coverage in the book or others?
Yeah, I was gonna say, for me, it's not coverage that my brain goes first to. It's actually photography, but maybe I can illustrate through photography, because when you get into the buttons, knobs, and dials, it can be so technical and confusing. If I said, okay, Sophie, set up ISO 800 f3.5, you're shooting a 500 sec, don't forget your white balance. You're like, wait, what? And explaining the whys of the different settings, and imagining light like water, or imagining f-stop and depth of field like diving into a swimming pool or walking past some fence posts. Being able to do or tell and then do immediately, and then say, okay, now let's just change this one number. Just roll it that way 5 times, 5 clicks, click, 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 click. Okay, now shoot it again. There's the second shot. And now let's look at the before and the after, or the first and the second photo. Do you see the difference that's happening there? That's like, doesn't it, you see how that's deeper there? That's like us diving in a deep pool. Remember, I was talking about a pool and so on. So I try to infuse my teaching, like, it's very intentional. I'm not at all trying to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but I really try to lean heavily on analogies. I use a lot of food analogies and water and swimming pools and fence posts and all the things to help students set a frame for their understanding. Because if we leave it purely technical and purely numbers, it just doesn't set in. And thank God it's something that's manipulative and touchable and engageable. And I tell my kids all the time, you're going to take a lot of bad pictures before you get the one. But when you get the one, there's no feeling like it. And let's remember, at the same time, Mr. Simmons has shot more bad pictures than you've ever shot pictures. So don't worry about being first place in that category. I've got it covered. I try to validate them making some mistakes and being comfortable in messing up, because that's just part of the journey.
Why have you stuck with your book for so long?
Because I believe in the power of storytelling, and I think student journalists are the ones best equipped to tell their own stories and the stories of their schools and communities. I've seen students blossom. Our own student journalists, our designers, our business and marketing team, I've seen those kids, students flourish through the activities and the skills development and the work that's baked into being part of a student media class. And our students come out the other end as critical thinkers and problem solvers and task masters and great designers and brilliant writers and talented, advertisers or video editors. To be able to walk on that journey in such a cyclical way. Like, I'm literally, this is like the night before I'm kicking off the Volume 8 staff, like literally tomorrow. And I'm pumped. It's not up there like Christmas Eve, but it's close. It's real close. Although I wouldn't mind if summer lasted, a couple more weeks. But to begin that journey again is one of the things. My work with the student journalists at Tesserae and student journalists at large, second to my wife and my children, they're the reason that I get out of bed in the morning. It is such powerful work and such powerfully important work. And I think that especially in an era where the professional journalists are taking shots on every side on fake news and struggling against disinformation and the lamestream media and all these clever things that you hear from pundits or critics of the media. I just want to instill in our kids, like, let's just talk facts, and let's learn people's stories, and let's have you be the vehicle, the vector for the sharing of that story. Let's share stories of our kids who are sports people and hunters, and let's share stories of the exchange student and of the math teacher who's a cancer survivor, or how one of our students who lives on a farm, their pond dried up this year, and maybe that's because of climate change. We can take this big idea like climate change and localize it to that sophomore who sits behind you in US history class. Like, that's extremely, extremely powerful stuff. And it's important. We work and live and learn in a relatively large, I mean, for our area, relatively large high school, 1,450 students, plus another 200 staff members. So that's over 1,600 people and well over 1,600 stories that have worth and value and merit in the telling. And I just get so much joy out of being the one that gets to support the student journalists who get then to tell their classmates stories as they uncover them in meaningful and authentic ways. And sometimes we fall short, or sometimes, like, it's, I don't mean to say that they're all like these super heavy stories of, like, the cancer survivor and things, although that story has been told. Sometimes it's just about, like, raising $4,000 at the car wash, or sometimes it's something silly, somebody singed their eyebrows in chemistry lab flames or something like that, or sometimes it's just this lovely little piece about how a person always looks forward to the tradition of making apple pies with their grandma at Thanksgiving. Like, it runs the gamut. Sometimes it's mental health and super serious and frankly pretty dark or heavy topics. But again, all of them have merit and value, and it's. I look at how newspapers are getting smaller and smaller, and I look at how thinly stretched even the local television stations are, and they do a nice job here and there, but they're not in our school and telling those stories. So if our student journalists don't do it, then who is going to? And that's why I say that they're the ones best equipped to tell the stories of the experience of COVID. My fondest hope is that students at CPPHS are able to look back at their volume 6 and 7 and likely volume 8 yearbooks, not 5 days from now, not 5 months from now, but 5 and 55 years from now, and remember, like, oh yeah, that was a crazy thing, and here we are 15 years later, here we are 20 years later, and reliving those stories or recalling the days that we're living right now. I mean, that's the true value of a high school yearbook. One that I would argue far surpasses in some ways the value of a daily newspaper. It's that time machine quality about it that is so thrilling and so exciting, and helps me, I think, impart to the kids, like, what a responsibility they bear to get it right. Because this isn't like they're going to publish and people are done with it 2 days later, like a local newspaper, or a couple of hours later. Like, these things are going to stick around. So we better do it right. We better tell the truth. We better get the quotes right. We better spell people's names right. The designs better lead to better readability and enjoyment and engagement with the audience. Yeah, you can tell. And you know this already. I mean, I love it, and I could tell you all the ways and all the reasons why. But I think it's about that storytelling more than anything, and it's about that personal growth that students that go through our program experience as well. And I have this mental picture of, like, on fighter jets, like out of World War II, when they shot somebody down, they like paint a little plane on the side. And so if you see somebody with like 20 planes, it means like they shot down 20 planes. And I don't mean to make it dark and stuff, but I just have this vision of like all these little like shapes of student journalists that I could paint on the side of our lab or something like that. All these graphic designers, sometimes they're talked about as notches in your belt. And I don't say, look at me, I did that. It's look at them, and look at the path that they started on. Like, I didn't make those yearbooks for them. I just had the honor and the privilege of walking on that journey with them, giving them instruction and advice and feedback, and pushing them and pushing them and pushing them. And they're now making their way in the world. Ivan Zigas, Volume 1 video editor, was with me over at West High before we closed down there. And in June of 2015, graduated, first graduating class at the high school. Had told his mom and dad earlier in the year he wasn't going to college. He was just going to go to LA and just go for it. He wanted to work in video production and film, and he thought he could just go for it. And wouldn't you know, today he's a production assistant on a whole bunch of different Netflix movies. He was just cutting a commercial for Apple 2 weeks ago when we were texting, and found his way, and he knew that was right for him. And I celebrate that. Like, not every path and every student that comes out of our program walks the college walk. There's lots of ways of making it in the world, and he certainly has. He's been phenomenally successful, turning one job into another, just based on his reputation for hard work. So all of those kids have been part of my journey, but so have veterinarians and moms and Air Force pilots, and police officers, and teachers. I've had all of those people in our program too, and I'll tell you, Sophie, every single one of them, and I've had this conversation many times with many different students, alumni of our program, but I think it's a representative sample. They'll tell you straight up that their time in the yearbook program impacted their lives in positive ways. And again, I think it goes back to the project management, or conflict resolution, communication skills, being able to write. You might laugh at it, but I know that I've got students that have come out of our program who have gone back to their church, or gone to college and been doing something for, let's say, a sorority in their junior year, and they can design an awesome flyer that goes up around campus because they were a designer on the yearbook staff. Or not even if they weren't a designer, they just knew good design from being in the program. And that's a little win for us, right? It's just another way. It's like a really positive spider web of all these skill sets and all these ways that it just kind of can infuse students' lives long after they've left the lab.
It sounds like one of the most important, or if not the most important, or meaningful aspects of the job for you is getting to hear from those students later and having them come back and tell you, these are all these cool, positive things that I've been able to do. And it, in a lot of ways, my career choice and skill building was built in your yearbook program. How have you felt in the moments when you've heard from a student who's graduated?
Like I made a difference. It's and again, to be very clear, it's not these profound, necessarily earth-shaking ways, but if they're able to come out of our program with a skill set, with a leadership and service oriented mindset, that is not about me, but is about we. Very much about community and supporting each other. And that yearbook's the biggest group project any of these students have ever worked on. It perhaps might be the biggest group project they ever worked on, a staff of 40 up to 50 students. It's incredibly validating to have students come back through the lab, or send an email, or hey, Mr. Simmons, I was thinking about yearbook this morning. I get that on a text, midday, some December Wednesday, just because it feels good. it absolutely feels good. It feels validating, and not, if I can, there's a nuance here for me, but it's not a pat on the back, look at all the good I did. It's a it's a thumbs up, look at what we shared in together. And I think there's an important difference there. Because again, it's not about me, it's about the we. It's about me with my students, which, together we get that community and that purpose, that common vision, those shared goals, and the journey that we walk together. um, it's incredibly meaningful to hear back from them. Perhaps more so, honestly, perhaps more so with the veterinarian and the Air Force pilot or the police officer. Um, I love it when students go out into design or communications or marketing, advertising or journalism. That's awesome. But to know that your book touched their lives, that they saw, that they reaped some of the rewards and will then carry them forward, even into parenthood or to being active members of their community. Um, I think about, to give you a specific example of, I guess, what I attempt to do. And I think you participated with us, but shooting the Wine Glass Marathon, that idea of service media, of we have a particular skill set, we have something we're good at, that not everybody is good at. So let's go be good at that thing to help out. And what can we do? What can we bring to this? Like, yeah, we could hand out water on the side of the road to the runners as they go by. Certainly, definitely need it, and certainly worthy. And any volunteering is good volunteering. But you know what? We put these tools in our hands, these lenses and cameras. We can really do something special. So let's go out there together and serve the community. And so when I am able to, when I hear stories about, again, maybe a little bit more in the professional sphere, or know of a yearbook grad who's photographing his little brother's soccer team because he can and because he has that skill set, or a female designer, going, like I said, to college and using her design skills in service to the rape crisis center. Oh my God! Like, are you for real? Like, that's just, I mean, that just makes my heart sing that they can use those skill sets forward into life. That's really, really important for me. It's much, the entire experience, Sophie, is much less about a book and making a book, and much more about helping make great people.
It seems like it's sort of you're talking sort of about like taking a skill set that the yearbook team has developed um, in the lab, or um, like practicing shooting photography sort of more on our own, and then bringing that to how students can use it in college for good, or with the soccer game for good, or in the Wine Glass Marathon, taking the skill set that we've learned more independently and bringing it to the community.
Right.
Um, and you also talked about like conflict resolution and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about, like, I think in order to build those kind of skill sets, you definitely have to have negative days, and in order
Mm-hmm.
to learn about conflict resolution and work in a team, you
It
have
has
to
to be
have
constant. It's a great question. Yep. Yep.
conflict. Could you talk about maybe your worst day on the staff, or worst day working with the staff, or a day where you really wanted to quit and why you didn't quit or move on from your book?
Yeah. I think, when you get a group of people, I think when you get a group of passionate people all in one space, all focused on the same thing, passionate people, driven people, people with ideas, it's somewhat inevitable that you get to a place where personalities conflict, ideas conflict, and you've got to try to work through that gracefully. And it doesn't always work out, and conflict can ensue, especially when people, I was going to say young people, but sometimes it's me, frankly, when we don't follow through the way that we need to, or we don't honor the commitments we've made, or don't honor each other by making the contributions we should be making. We don't follow through and do the thing we said we were going to do. So, one that really, really sticks out, I will say, a few years back now, we had some pretty divisive situations with our executive leadership team, our editors in chief. And it became kind of multiple people versus one person. And each taken on their own, incredible young people, talented, driven, but just the chemistry was off, the mix was wrong. And that never put me to a place of me wanting to leave the program or leave my work. But it was among the most challenging situations that I've been in. And there was no fixing it. And honestly, it was more than 5 years ago now. So my details, I can remember how it felt. But I don't remember April 2nd. I don't remember, that phone call on May 17th. And it felt very uncomfortable because I want the staff to be a place where people feel safe and encouraged and want to be there. And it got some of the personalities and the acrimony got to a place where people didn't feel like they were welcome in the lab. And that was really, really harrowing. I'll tell you, this is not quite what you were asking, but the place where, as much as I love it, the time a low point for me was this past January with COVID, and not a point of hopelessness, but just how are we going to do this, and by when, and who. I was ready just to kind of throw it in and stop fighting the current and just say it's just going to be the pandemic book. Just volume 7 is just going to, that coverage just busted. We're not sure what we're doing there. Somebody else is going out on quarantine, can only see kids face to face 2 days a week. It was just obstacle. And I don't recall there being any one kind of big powwow meeting. But in February, the staff just found a different gear and just went for it. And the book that came out the other end, we missed every deadline last year. We missed every single deadline, which, as you know, that's a big deal. And they made the final one. So all the little in-betweeners kind of setting the stage, they just blew right past them. And they submitted the book on April 19th at 11:58 p.m. with literally 2 minutes to spare to get it uploaded to the plant before we would incur a financial penalty and all of the jazz. And I'll tell you, Sophie, I would put volume 7 up against any tester the kids have ever read. I put it up against any book in the country. It's outstanding journalism. The designs are screaming. The storytelling is authentic. I mentioned to you earlier, it's my fondest hope that students out of CPBHS are going to be able to look at volume 7, 10 and 20 years from now and jump right in the time machine because our team did the work that they were supposed to do. And just what a turnabout, because January I was just like that. I'm done. It was stressing me out, and I was not sleeping well, and all the things, and they just landed it. So, yeah.
And a final question: could you talk about what your goals or plans are in terms of helping students to flourish more in the lab, flourish and grow more going forward?
I think, you're not asking specific to this year, but getting back to class 5 days a week is going to be much, much needed for us. I think we are welcoming more and younger students to the lab. We're getting more freshmen than we ever have. We've got a pretty wide range, but need to do more work, I think, with our diversity and inclusion. But we've got a pretty nice mix. My friend Carrie Faust says your staff can't cover the school if your staff doesn't look like the school. And at a school that's 91% white, we actually are ahead of that pace with our racial diversity, which I'm proud of. I think that areas that I want to push the staff include our digital footprint, the video work and the web work, and timely posting out to social media. I really want to take an opportunity this year, because of some of the limits of last year, to better identify I want to say to my kids, and some of them don't know because they've never yearbooked before, but I want to say to them, what do you want to get out of this year? Like what is a goal that you have for yourself this year with your staff? I want to take better pictures. I want to design. I want to learn how to do business ads, or I want to, who knows? It might not be like a tangible, journalism skill, but I really want to be more intentional and more supportive as an educator in walking that journey with them. Sometimes they'll say, I want to do ABC, and by mid-year, we're over here working on XYZ, and that's just because of the year we're having. And it's not to say that the XYZ goals, these other goals, aren't meaningful, but I do want to make sure that I'm supporting the kids, as best I can with the reasons that they think they're there. I'm happy to broaden their horizons, right, and do more. I think one thing that I've tried to do the last couple of years and need to continue to push on is identifying, actually, I think this would be it, identifying for the kids who do want to go into careers in media or are open to thinking about careers in media, also bigger than media, but journalism, communications, design, video, film production, all of it. And taking them on a more intentional journey with looking at schools and colleges in our area and region, and also welcoming more either alumni, specifically from Tesserae and CPP, or people in my professional network of like, there's no reason we can't get on a Zoom for 40 minutes with a sports reporter in Buffalo. There's no reason we can't get this amazing photographer to do a Zoom session with us from Arizona. So can I expand their horizons? Makes me think of that Marvel show right now, but like, what if we, let's give you an opportunity to think about this. And I should say, it's not that we haven't been doing that for years. When we've traveled, for years, I've taken my kids on media tours. I think you might have been with me on one of the conventions, and we'll go out and, if we're in Dallas, let's go see a Dallas newsroom or a magazine. If we're in Chicago, let's go visit a Chicago magazine, to show our yearbook students that they can functionally yearbook in real life. I think COVID kind of just put us back on our heels on that. And I'd really like to get back to that and continue supporting those kids in that journey. I think we as a program need to do better with greater inclusion, and not just telling the same stories kind of year after year of a same or similar kind of IB kid or varsity athlete. I think we have a representation problem in the book, not ethnic and racial, although that's certainly a consideration as well. But a lot of the region's kids, a lot of the rural kids, we don't have a ton of engagement with them, and they have important stories that deserve to be told as well. And that's one of the things I want to focus on with the kids this year. We're gonna, you can appreciate this. We're gonna do somehow a coverage audit of, after we're done interviewing a kid, we'll say, okay, that was a female student. They take one IB class. They don't play any sports, and they're involved in this club. And to try to, I guess we might try to put that like in a Google form, because then it spreadsheets it, and then we can say, okay, now by this point in the year, we've interviewed 300 kids. Do you realize that 200 of them take at least one IB class? Do you realize that's a significant chunk of functionally honors kids? So which kids are we not engaging with? That's given me kind of the chin rub of looking at that diagnostically, and more critically, to make sure that we are more authentically representing the voices across the experience at the school.